Hey everybody, this is Brian Yov. On episode number 50, I talked to Jonathan French. His novel is going to be published next summer. He had excellent points about writing and publishing and getting your voice out there, about life, about being a father. Here is Jonathan French. You are number 50.
Oh, nice. That's a good number.
You're number 50. I went to high school with a guy named Neil French. Obviously, you're probably not related to him, so if I accidentally call you Neil, I've been thinking about him all day long. I've played football with him and everything.
It's a more common last name than I even realize. The more older I get, the more I realize more people have got it.
Where are you from?
I was born in Nashville, Tennessee, originally.
Oh, no kidding. I was stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
All right, on yeah.
When I was in the Army, I spent some time in Nashville. The Batman Building is what we called it. That big, it's AT&T or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called by Nashvillians? Or
I actually don't know. I left there when I was 9, so
okay.
I know more. I don't really know a hell of a lot about my birth city because I was like in 3rd grade when I left. So
where do you call home now?
I live in Atlanta currently.
Oh, I gotcha. Atlanta is not one of my favorite places, unfortunately.
It's why is that?
Well, I grew up in Florida, and like I said, I was stationed in Fort Campbell. It was like a 12-hour back and forth, and every single time I'd get stuck in some horrendous traffic at the weirdest times. Like it'd be 3 o'clock in the morning, and I would just be stuck in like bumper to bumper traffic.
Like. It's definitely known for that. I learned to drive here, so I kind of got used to it. But then I've lived in Chicago and LA, and I think once I experienced that, I never complained about here ever again.
No, I guess, yeah. Los Angeles is supposed to be horrible. I'm in New York City, so I mean, honestly, if you're in a car here, you're kind of dumb.
Yeah, I only drove in New York City once, and I was actually driving a U-Haul, and I thought, wow, this is talk about a trial by fire. Like it was,
right.
It was brutal.
Yeah, that's not good. I mean, sometimes you can get really lucky and there's no traffic whatsoever, and then other times it's like you're back to back. And really here, there are rules. If you know the rules, you're good to go. You know where to stand, you know where to go, you know where the line's supposed to move, you're fine. But if you don't know, it's like you can get honked at and screamed at and flipped at, and I mean, it's horrible if you don't know the social cues.
Yeah, I went to college for about 2 years in New York City. It's where I met the woman I ended up marrying, and she stayed for 10 years. So we have quite a lot of.
Oh, no kidding. Where'd you go to college in New York City?
Well, we started off at Marymount Manhattan. We both ended up leaving there. She ended up at Columbia, and then I got my degree in North Carolina, so not nowhere in New York, but
it's actually where my wife went, is at Columbia as well.
There you go, right on. Yeah, it's a good school.
Did you get your degree in creative writing?
No, it's weird. I got my career in something almost as useless, or practically probably more useless. Now I got a theater and history double major, and
oh, you poor guy. Yeah, you're like me. I actually did get that creative writing degree.
Yeah,
but I also have a love of theater and almost tried a double major, but they wanted me to take like a 1 credit production design class that was like a bastard as far as like hours go. I mean, 1 hour credit wise, but you had to spend like 80 hours a week, busting your butt behind it's like, I can't afford to do this, guys, but you're not going to get your double major. I was like, okay, then I'm not getting my double major then.
No, I lucked out. I didn't mean to. It was more one of these things was like my credits at Marymount just basically gave me a theater degree. So it was just like, well, I only had to do a couple things to get it. So once I transferred, it was just kind of a no-brainer.
What was it about theater history that appealed to you?
Well, it's actually theater and history, so not theater history.
Theater and history.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, it's funny because I've got this theater degree and I make my living as a writer. My wife has a writing degree from Columbia and makes her living as an actress. So we somehow we ended up making it work, but with complete opposite intent. So
that's very interesting. Well, in terms of writing, I think theater works for you, because I took a lot of theater classes and I write in beats. I mean, you kind of understand movement.
Yeah.
Would you agree? And it works in a way because you're entertaining in those type of environments. Do you find that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think in a lot of ways I came late to what I was supposed to do. I mean, I was told by my improv teacher in New York when I was still trying to be an actor that I was a hopeless playwright, that I had no business being an improvisational guy. And that I just, I was constantly storytelling in my head. And she said, look, you think really quickly, but it doesn't, you're still not being improvisational. You're just writing ahead. And so, I don't know. I enjoyed the storytelling aspect, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's certainly having any type of on hand physical where you kind of get to know yourself better and get to know, drama structure and all that. It can't hurt. I mean, it definitely can't hurt when you're writing. So
Do you have experience on stage?
yeah. I haven't done it in almost 10 years now, but yeah.
But your wife is acting. She's actually doing it down there in Atlanta.
Yeah, she had a major stage career in Chicago, and she's done national tours. But then, Atlanta's not known for being a big theater town, so she was sort of struggling. But then
But
suddenly,
it's kind of turning out to be a big movie town
right?
now.
She's transitioned. She's completely transitioned. So that's been really cool to see. So
that's fantastic. I know Baby Driver was filmed down there, and a lot of the superhero movies are being filmed down there.
Most of the Marvel ones are done here now, and of course television as well. Just Walking Dead brought everyone else here. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Have we seen her in anything?
If you watch, maybe. So she's done a lot with Tyler Perry Studios. So if you watch BET, she's done episodes of If Loving You Is Wrong. She's done episodes of Being Mary Jane. So it's funny because we're not to put a racial comment on it, but we're white, and so we don't tend to watch a lot of BET. But when she meets people who watch BET, sometimes they recognize her, so it's kind of neat. But yeah, so she's getting some work, and she's done a couple commercials, but it's coming. I mean, she did a movie recently, which Netflix might pick up, an independent film that Netflix is interested in. So we got our fingers crossed. She's got a lot of irons in the fire. So we're both kind of at this cusp of kind of breaking, and it's weird. It's later than we anticipated, but better later than never. So.
I checked out your website, and you've got some great work on there. I mean, it's very captivating. Tell me about your novel. It's a series now, isn't it, though? It's not just one.
Yeah. So I started off. I started off as just an independent published guy, as a self-publishing guy. I had,
which I think is the way to go now. I mean, you have to start.
Yeah. You do. You have to start somewhere, and it's. I mean, it changes every week. The industry is so in flux, but so there is sort of a frontier quality to it, and it's sort of based on your personality. I mean, some people just absolutely can't do the self-published thing. Some people think you shouldn't because of the stigmas involved. But at the end of the day, you really can make it work, and we're seeing that more and more. But yeah, I started writing an epic fantasy series.
What do you mean by making it work, though? I mean, it's getting an audience at the end of the day, right? I mean, you can do the Andy Weir thing and not have an audience, and then become Andy Weir and have an audience. Then traditional publishers will come looking for you.
Right. Yeah. We'll I'll get back to Andy Weir. There's actually a cool connection there in a second.
Absolutely cool. I love that guy.
So
hopefully it's a good connection. You don't ruin my
no.
About it.
No, I don't know him personally, but there's a 1 degree of Kevin Bacon. It's very positive. So yeah, so I, as far as making it work, you probably know this, and your listeners probably know this to a degree. I mean, self-publishing was seen as just very, it's like you had professional leprosy. It was like not the thing to do. And if you self-published, you were doomed. You were never going to be able, you'd have to use a different name. No one wanted to touch your stuff. You weren't considered
hand in hand with Vanity Press. Basically.
Right. Well, and that's if you did that. Well, then of course, the vanity presses are still out there, but they kind of thankfully dwindled to the background because print on demand came in. And of course, ebooks is a massive game changer. Mm-hmm. But there was still that idea that it's, the gatekeepers can't keep the quality control. So a lot of self-published stuff is crap, which is true. But at the end of the day, what people are starting to see, if it's a good book, it doesn't matter where it came from, what its origins are. If it's a good book, it's a good book. And if readers are digging it, they're digging it. And that's all that matters. And New York and London are starting to warm to that more and more. And there's innovators that are seeing that, oh, we don't need to just treat self-published people like lepers. We do need to kind of, treat them as a talent pool and maybe even recruit from it. And then there are people who make that decision where it's like, I don't feel like going the traditional route after succeeding at self-publishing. But the fact of the matter is, if you can compete with the traditional market, if you have good interior formatting, good cover design, your story is solid, you know how to write, you've put the time and effort in across the board, then no one is going to tell you no anymore, just based on where you came from, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I started off as kind of in the traditional world. I had an agent. I started writing seriously in like 2008, and I was living in Chicago, and my wife was working as a personal assistant for a thriller novelist who was through Harlequin, so she was traditionally published. We had some contacts, and so I was able to sort of make some traditional publishing contacts. But after about 2 years, I really didn't get anywhere. I didn't have a deal, and I really was eyeballing self-publishing from the beginning because I just liked the control aspect of it. I felt like it fit with my personality. So after in 2012, I self-published my first book, which was the first series of this. My first book was called The Exiled Heir, and my series was called The Autumn's Fall Saga. And then it kind of did what you'd expect a first book to do, but I hit the convention circuit really hard. I did a lot of personal appearances, was doing book fairs, and I just kind of built like an email list and an audience.
Can you go into what hitting the convention circuit was for you?
Yeah, sure. So hopefully it's interesting. I
love that kind of stuff. I mean, break it apart for me is
So I started off just paying for like a vendor table, like essentially like looking up what cons I could get to or what, and luckily Atlanta is a really good con town. So I had a lot that I didn't even have to like just be here and live at home.
Dragon Con, right? Down there?
Yeah, that one's the big dog. That's really hard to get into, but we have more. I think there's like now a convention basically every week, and it's geared for whatever. Like 221 Con is geared just for Sherlock Holmes fans. We've got Fairy Con, we've got Conjuration, which is for Harry Potter. I mean, the list goes on and on. Atlanta really is becoming the hot spot for small, intimate, very like focused conventions.
Would you know a reason why that would be? Is Atlanta just marketing towards the? I
think it has a lot to do with
the geek market, but I guess that would be rude. But
well, no, it is. But I think my theory there is that Dragon Con has been around for what? Now they're going on 30 years. I don't know what the exact number is. I think this is like 26 that we're coming up on or something. And it was always an independent, for better or for worse, it was an independent con. And what has happened is in the decades since it started, those people who organized it and who volunteered for it and who've worked with it have gotten very good at that business. And so what has happened is a lot of them have broken off and said, I did Dragon Con for 8-10 years, and now I want to do my own thing. And so they've got all of this convention experience, but they're going more grassroots. So now Dragon Con is this big juggernaut, and then all of its sort of people who got experience working there are now kind of branching off. That's not true across the board, obviously, but there's a lot of cross pollination. You talk to these organizers of these smaller cons, and you realize that you were with Dragon Con for a lot of years, so that has something to do with it.
I mean, they're kind of mad too in a way, right? I mean, Dragon Con at one time was intimate. You can go there and you could interact with the vendors, and you had friendships that you could develop, and you could talk comic books, you could talk this, that, and the other thing, right? And that kind of stopped being the case because the big corporations kind of moved in.
It's definitely bloated. There is a lot of sort of, some people say it's like hipster talk. It's like, I knew Dragon Con before it was cool, but the fact is that
it's not the case though. I mean, you do want the intimacy back. That's why there are these smaller cons kind of coming up, right?
Yes, it's gotten too big for its britches. And I go to cons. I mean, I go to Gen Con every year as a gamer, and there is a big difference in how Indianapolis treats
Gen Con. Indianapolis. I was going to say Iowa.
Yeah, there is a big difference in how the city of Indianapolis treats Gen Con and how the city of Atlanta treats Dragon Con. Like Atlanta, they kind of treat it as like a joke when the news covers it. They don't really give it the weight that I feel like it deserves. It's a big draw. It's a huge boon for the town. And they just sort of see it as almost like we're embarrassed by it. And that needs to change. But it's gotten so big that there is some anger, there is some resentment. And like you say, that there's this loss of intimacy.
But it's funny though, because I talked to a guy not too long ago. He does a YouTube series called Dragon Crawler. He does 170,000 hits per video,
uh-huh.
and he is in Utah, so he does the Salt Lake City Con. And it's not very big, but the kind of stuff they're putting out is extremely interesting. Their panels are fun. It's not hard to get in. The prices are manageable.
Yeah,
You can go for the weekend and it's not like killing you.
that's it. Yeah.
Like I said, I'm in New York and I look at my New York City Comic Con, and a Thursday night, if I want to go, it's $55. I want to go
Yep.
for the weekend. That's like half, a quarter of my rent.
Yep.
It's
insane.
outrageous.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we're experiencing here. I mean, Conjuration is one I love, which is it's a Harry Potter themed, and I've been a guest author there every year, and they're only like 5 years old, but it's run by this husband and wife who, he was a teacher who used to run a Harry Potter camp, and you couldn't meet better people. It's very affordable, it's very manageable, it's very and just as you say. So yeah, I mean, so basically what I did was I found these smaller cons, and some of them I was paying to be a vendor, and then what I did was I sort of made a name for myself, because even though I pay to be a vendor, it's like I'm paying you so I can sell my books at a table.
Uh-huh.
But then I would do panels. And so what I quickly found was that a lot of them, if you just asked, were willing to let you be there for free as long as you would do like some panels. So being on a panel and discussing stuff that, that they wanted you to talk about on their different tracks, whether it was a literary track or the comic book track or whatever, that's the currency. So it was like, oh, so you end up doing,
I would love to do that. I really would.
Yeah.
That sounds so interesting to me. I'm so confused at how to actually broach the subject of, what do you want me to talk about? What would be fun?
At the end of the day, they want, a lot of them, especially the smaller ones, just want people, they'll ask you, what do you feel comfortable talking about? And I'd flat tell them, be like, look, I can talk Tolkien, I can talk comics, I can talk, and you just tell them. And then they say, okay, well, that fits with this or doesn't. And then they sort of build a schedule. And then once you build a name for yourself, you start pitching your own panel. So now I run like, I pitch an idea. I'm like, look, I'd like to do a panel on this, and these are the people I'd like on it. And most of the time they're very receptive. And so that's just, I spent a couple years doing that, and built up an email list and got some readers, and I released my second book. And then my second book in my series, it was called The Errantry of Bantam Flynn. It kind of went big and ended up being a Kindle bestseller. It was a sublist bestseller, so it was only on like Norse Viking Fantasy, but it still got a lot of visibility because of that. And so yeah, I started to just sort of.
I see a connection with theater though too, don't you? In fact, when you were, your theater degree is coming in handy with these panels, aren't they? I mean, you're in front of people entertaining them.
There's definitely and I'm not unique to this, but there is a defiance of the typical like author who's really withdrawn and kind of
I'm just trying to picture myself in your place. I'm putting on your shoes, sitting there on that stage, making myself an expert in something, and I'm trying to picture what that would be.
Well, I mean, sometimes you're not. The best thing to do is just kind of admit that and say, look, here's the opinions, or here's the experience I bring to the table, and whatever. And but con goers,
I'm gonna draw a dragon for you. Here, watch. An hour later, it's barely a dragon. Okay, well, thanks for showing up.
But, there's people that's they're just they're talking heads, and that's kind of what they're known for, right? Do you find that you develop an audience that way? I mean, I was looking at your Amazon author page, and I was noticing that you're quite liked in terms of your books. I mean, you have very high rating on your likes. Your books are quite well received. Do you think that's because you're appreciated in these cons and you've developed kind of a following through your convention work? I mean, I would say the thing about that is that I don't know that I can draw the correlation that the people reviewing the books on Amazon are necessarily the people that I've met in person. It's hard to say. It definitely can't hurt. I mean, I do see on Twitter, I end up being with people that and interacting with people that I have met and talked to. But like Goodreads reviews, those are way more prevalent than Amazon reviews. And I know I haven't met half those people. So I think at the end of the day, your product still has to be good. You still have to be a good writer.
Yeah.
I mean, being liked does not hurt, obviously. That helps with your core fan base who are going to get you through. But I
understand. At the end of the day, the product is going to stand out more than anything else.
Right. So, Yeah. So anyway, to sort of get to the Andy Weir thing, because I don't want to leave that hanging. I I I ended up departing from my series. My first series, I'm going to finish it, but I stopped after 2 books because I needed to do something else. And so I wrote this book called The Gray Bastards, which was a standalone book, had nothing to do with my series. And it was basically the elevator pitch for it is Sons of Anarchy with half orcs. So I wrote this kind of really crude biker fantasy fiction with, kind of classic Tolkien races sort of turned on their head.
Mhm.
And I entered into this contest after it had been out almost a year, called the Self-Published Fantasy Blog Off, which was hosted by Mark Lawrence. And of course, if people who read,
Oh, okay.
people who read fantasy, especially grimdark fantasy, they know that name, big name. And he just wanted to, even though he's traditionally published, he just wanted to host this contest to help self-published fantasy authors gain some exposure. There was no prize, and I entered the second year. So he'd done it the year previously, and then I entered. So it was
That
300.
contest just ended, actually. I think I
Yeah, a
saw
couple months,
the
couple
finish.
months ago.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. So it was 300 books, and then it got narrowed down to a top 10, and then it got narrowed down to a winner, and I won it.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
yeah, thank you. So, but before I won it, when I made it to the top 10, I was doing really well, and the bloggers that were the official reviewers of the contest were being very favorable. So one day, I just on a random Tuesday, I got this email in my inbox that said that the subject was "Hi from an editor." That was literally what it said. And you get these sometimes, and a lot of times it's people trying to sell you stuff. And so at first
Mhm.
I thought, this is nothing. But then the signature was, executive editor, Penguin Random House. So I'm
Oh,
going,
wow.
okay, what's this? So I read it over about 3 times, took it up to my wife, showed her the email. What do you think? And she says, I think this is legit. He wants to talk. What do you? So fast forward a little bit, I end up talking to this executive editor at Random House, who happens to be the same guy that pulled The Martian and Andy Weir out of the self-publishing world. Same dude. So it's the same editor who discovered The Martian is contacting me,
Wow.
and yeah, and so the world changed overnight. And what's funny is I ended up signing this book over to Penguin Random House, and I hadn't even won this contest yet. So then I won the contest, and what was kind of frustrating was I went overnight from being this self-published guy to then this book that got picked up by a major house, and then I immediately had to take the book down because it was like I got all this attention. I became this self-published phenomenon, but the next day it was like, oh, I've won the contest, great. I'm sorry, I've sold this book to Penguin Random House, so I can no longer sell it independently. And so I'm now in this like weird limbo area where uh, the book is going to be re-released in a year under them, so next summer.
Yeah.
So I kind of had this like brief spark of being this, kind of self-published, guy who had sort of made it. And now,
Wonderkin.
yeah. And now suddenly I'm back to being
What
completely obscure.
what happens with your series now in a circumstance like this? Do you kind of hold everything back?
Well,
Being
so
kind of
so with the Gray Bastards, it was sort of meant to be a standalone, but now they want 2. So I'm giving them the first one that I've already written and that was already self-published, and now I'm writing them a sequel. So I may have a 2-book deal for Bastards books with an option for a third if those 2 do well. So Bastards
wow.
could end up being a trilogy. As my other series, the one that I originally self-published, the Autumn Swallow Saga, that is still mine.
It's still yours.
That's still completely mine. Now, the agent that I now have, which my editor at Random House helped me get, the agent that I now have has the manuscripts in her possession, and she's taking a look at them. Of course, this is the way the business works. I mean, this is not me bragging, but the thing is, if the Bastards books do well, no one's going to want to ignore my backlist, right? I mean, it's
No,
just the
absolutely
way.
not. And you
Right,
own those things. I
right,
mean, it's just good for you.
right. So we'll see. I mean,
Yeah.
I kind of like holding on to them. I'm good to be a
Right.
hybrid guy, and no one hates that these days. I mean, there's so many
No.
authors that it's like, oh, you have some self-published books, you have some traditionally published books. So, it's a cool position to be in. If the money was right, I would probably sell Autumn's Fall as well. But I'm learning a lot. I mean, I'm in a very different place than I was a year ago. So I'm back to being a journeyman and just trying to learn this new world
That's
of,
so cool.
yeah.
So, I mean, what are you writing right now, though? Are you working on the traditionally published work? or are you working back
Yes.
on the independent? You are only
No.
working on that.
Right, because it's funny because it's tough because like there's the few hundred people that are waiting for the third Autumn's Fall book. They're being really patient because right now I'm contractually obligated. It's like Gray Bastards is in the hands of Penguin Random House through Crown Publishing. They're waiting on the sequel. I'm finishing that up currently. That's got to be in basically by the end of the year. So I've got to put my self-published stuff on standby. And because I'm contractually obligated to show, this is a standard deal. This is most authors who've signed a big contract will tell you this is always the case.
Yeah.
For the most part, is that they want to see your next book no matter what it is. Well, it kind of puts me in this weird place where it's like, okay, you bought 2 of my books, but the next book I want to write on is a third book in a series that you don't really have any interest in. So why would I shoot myself in the foot by coming to you with a third book of a series that you don't own and that you have no history with? So basically I'm in this situation where it's like, I've got to write the third Bastards book before I can write the third Autumn's Fall book. Otherwise it doesn't help anybody.
Well, let me ask you this. How do you write? When I write, just personal anecdote, I write more than one thing at a time. You know what I mean? When I wake up in the morning, I'm usually have 2 or 3 things that I'm working on at the same time. I have my novel, I have my short fiction, and I usually balance those during the month. I finish 2 or 3 short fiction stories by the end of the month, and I'm constantly either working on the new novel or rewriting the novel that I want to finish by the end of whatever the time frame I've given myself. How do you work your time schedule?
Mine.
Can you work on both novels is what I'm asking, basically.
Personally, I wish so far at my current habits and skill level, and time management, I do not have that ability. And I wish I did. I feel like it's a failing, honestly, that I can't do 2 things at once. And I can give 1,000 excuses. Tonally they're very different. But at the end of the day, I've got a 5-year-old son. I just don't have the time, and I can't split my brain that way. So
my dad, he was a major in the Army, and he used to ask me, what are you doing between the hours of 2 and 5 in the morning?
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's tricky, but no, unfortunately I'm working on one thing at a time right now. And I'm also dealing with, for the first time, having an editorial team, which is very new to me. I mean, it used to be, it's just,
tell me about that. How does that work for the process of developing new words? I mean,
well, yeah, I really don't know yet, because I mean, I do and I don't, because the book that I've been working with them on was one that already existed, and one which already won a contest, and one which already had readership. And and fans of Gray Bastards, some of them have been a little like concerned. I won't say panicked, but they've written me, I've gotten emails and like, is Gray Bastards going to change? Are they going to mess it up? And it's like,
I can't imagine that, though, because this is a guy that loved it already, right?
Yeah, totally did. Totally on board
why
with
would
it.
he come in and say, well, we're going to toss this and delete this? I mean, he loves it. I mean, why would he change it tonally?
And he's not. He's very professional. He's very good. He put in a ton of hours. He read it once for pleasure, and that's how he discovered me. And then he read it again with his professional hat on once we were working together and collaborating. And when I got his notes, it was really overwhelming at first, because it was just pages and pages and pages. But then you start reading it, and you're like, wow, there's a reason why this guy is who he is. And so essentially what I'm telling people is, look, I did not want to have to retcon anything. I didn't want people who had already read the self-published version to have to reread it. That just didn't seem fair. It didn't seem right. So the story is still the same, but here's the analogy I'm sort of giving, is that the cake is still the same cake. The flavor of the cake is still the same flavor. The icing is still the same. What my editor at Crown and Random House is doing is he's coming in saying, let's tweak the recipe so that it tastes a little bit better and that it presents a little bit better. We just want it to look a little bit better and taste a little bit better. So maybe instead of 4 eggs, let's do 3. So it's like it's just these kind of really smart, just sort of polished, and so they're just polishing it up.
I mean, obviously you're a good writer, and he is a professional editor, and together you guys are going to make a great team.
Let's hope. Yes. Yeah. So far, yeah, it's been tough, but I mean, I'm trying to, it's like, look, they are putting some faith in me. They came to me. I said yes. I didn't have to say yes. So at the end of the day, I have to do my due diligence and not do everything that he says hook, line, and sinker, but at least, absorb it and think about it and try to implement it. And so it's slowed me down definitely in my productivity, but only because, you know, it's like being a kid. It's like I'm learning to tie my shoe again.
It's
So
very interesting because, I mean, if you look at the indie marketplace, that dude, I don't know his name. What's his name again?
as far as the editor, it's Julian Pavia.
Julian Pavia doesn't exist in the independent book world. You know what I
Correct.
mean? That guy is only in traditional publishing.
Right.
And there's a reason for that. You know what I mean? That he gets paid a lot of money for his job. If he existed in the independent book world, he does in a way. I guess he's just very expensive.
Right. I mean, the freelance market for editors is out there, and there's a cottage industry for self-published people. I mean, and you can find some great editors, but you're right. You end up paying more.
Pay a lot of money.
More. You usually pay more for a great editor than you do for a great cover artist. I mean, that's just the way it goes.
And I would be remiss to pay the money that some people want to edit my novel freelance. You know, they want $3,000 or whatever to take a look at my novel. I'm like, what?
Yeah, I mean, you have to vet them. I mean, they would have to have proven themselves, or had worked with somebody who, you know, like another author, you know, who totally vouches for them. But, you know, it's dealer's choice though, right? I mean, they're out there. You just, if you feel like you need one, you know, if you want to give your book the best chance, then you definitely, you know, could pay a professional editor. Now, did I on my first self-published book? No, I didn't. And did it do okay? Yeah, it did okay. So, I mean, is it necessary? Some people will tell you yes. I'm not going to tell you that.
I don't think so. I mean, my opinion is the story is going to be the thing that stands out at this stage.
Yeah.
There are going to people that are going to tell you differently, like, oh, I got totally taken out because of that misplaced comma or that word was misspelled. But never in my life have I actually read a book and said, my God, that comma is in the wrong place. And I got taken out. And I know for sure that there have been books that have been, you know, grammatically wrong. I've just never noticed it. But I have noticed fantastic stories. You know what I mean? I've noticed fantastic characters.
And the thing is that, yeah, I mean, poor punctuation, bad grammar, and all that aside, I mean, if your book has a lot of just development problems and tonal problems and just structure problems, then, you know, most freelance editors, you know, if they're just doing a line edit, you're not paying for them to do that anyway. Now, if you're paying them to do a developmental edit, then it's going to be even more money. And if they're worth their salt, then hopefully they can help you through all that. But, you know, if you're going in with that many problems out of the gate, you probably just need more practice, and you don't need to
write.
You're right. You don't need to be publishing right now. Right.
You need to be writing and writing and writing and writing and writing and not worried about whether or not your novel is ready for consumption.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, the world is filled with people trying to do this. And I mean, it must feel good that you've risen to the level that you have. I mean, where have you come from? Tell me where you first established the idea that you deserve to call yourself a writer.
I mean, I always enjoyed creative writing. It was mostly the only school assignments I ever did. I was notorious for not doing homework, but I always did my creative writing assignments, and I always did them too much. Like, you know, I always did way more than I was supposed to.
Are you talking about like high school, or is this college, or
both? Yeah, both. I ended up.
I did not have any high school writing assignments. I don't remember writing one single thing in high school.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I had a couple good ones, but you know, it's so yeah. And then I always sort of wrote for fun. Like I said, I'm a gamer, so I was always at the role playing table. So I'd be writing stories for my gaming friends, and you know, being in the dungeon master or whatever. So it was always sort of there, but I never really thought I would write a book. And then I moved to Chicago when I was 28 years old to be a stuntman and an actor. And my first winter there, I moved in February. So if you can imagine moving to Chicago in February.
Why did you do that, my friend?
I got
Did you not know that Chicago in the winter is the worst place on the face of the planet?
Yeah, I fell in love with the city, so it didn't matter. I was so ready to be there, and I got a part in a play, so I had every reason to go, but I kind of didn't know anybody, and so I didn't have a lot of money, so it was like I was loading trucks for UPS at night, playing World of Warcraft a little bit, and writing. Like, those were the three things I was doing. And
that's very interesting. Going to Chicago, I mean, did you feel like you were missing out on the city, working at night, playing WoW and writing? I mean, you moved to this I did the same thing, right? I moved to New York City, and I'm busting my ass to live here, playing World of Warcraft. You know, I lived in a hostel for, 24 hours a week. I had to work 40 or 60 hours a week for food and stuff. I was like, and then I had no time or energy to do anything
Yeah.
but play a little bit of WoW in my off
Yeah.
time.
I did. I
Hearing
did
it,
feel.
it's
I
like,
did.
why am I here? Why am I
Yeah.
doing this to myself?
Yeah. No, I did feel that way, but I did manage to. I did manage to sort of break out of the shell. Eventually, I wasn't working nights anymore. I got a different, better job, and so Chicago was a brief, glorious period. It's one of those things I think for the rest of my life I'll always look back on with just a lot of fondness. I made, I wrote my first book there. I made friends for life there. Chicago gave me permission. It almost tested me. It was like, it gave me permission to be a struggling artist and say, look, prove it,
Yeah.
get out there and prove it. And so I ended up going there to try to be an actor, and it made me a writer. So, yeah, I mean, I'll always look at that with some fondness.
I've never been to Chicago. Honestly, I've wanted to desperately go to Chicago just to eat a piece of pizza, or
Yeah,
actually get a pizza. But
it's such a great food town. I mean, and even having, and New York is obviously too, but yeah, no, if you're, it's great. I mean, I've
I
lived
just
both.
lied to you. I have been to Chicago. I've been to the airport.
Yeah, yeah. On that metric, I've been to Tokyo, but yeah.
I'll have you. Well, the Chicago airport is horrible. It was not a very good experience. That I think everybody's experience the Chicago airport's pretty bad.
Well, and it depends on which one too, because there's O'Hare and Midway.
O'Hare, yeah, O'Hare. So you're a gamer, you're a role player, and you do minis. Also, I see that you sell them on your website. You do the painting. Do you still do the painting?
Yeah, but that was like a really dumb side business. I mean, I'm not close to being like very good, so it was, it was like here or there. I mean, I'd get one commission every like 5 months, and so it really was just a lark. I mean, I would still do it, but unless this podcast goes out and I get inundated with like 500 orders, and then
Would you appreciate that, or would you love doing that if like this podcast? I mean, I would love for you to get 500 orders of this podcast out.
no,
That means I'm getting that many listens.
right,
And that would be
right.
wonderful for both of
mean,
us, as a matter of fact.
Realistically, I am not. People who know miniature painting will look at my stuff and know that I am not close to being a professional. Like people who win contests are going to look at my stuff and laugh. Basically, I'm the guy who can do it and can do it to where it's okay. So if you don't have any idea how to paint a mini, I'm your guy. But you can probably be better than me within a year or two, if not shorter, if people just attempted it.
I love minis. I love D&D. I love role-playing games. I didn't discover it until much, much later on in my life. I didn't. No, it's not true. It's not the discovering aspect of it. It's finding people to play with.
You have a tough time in New York? That shocks me.
No, New York was easy. New York was no problem at all. I was able to find games all over the place. It was younger in my life.
Oh, got it.
I was not able to find anybody to play with. My father, when I was much younger, 9, 10, 7, 8, discovered D&D. I think that's when it first came out. The red box, broke that open. We used to role play all the time. And then nobody. I was an athlete in high school. It was ridiculed. Nobody wanted to play D&D.
Yeah.
And then that was it. The Army, I played some in the Army. I was able to find some games, but nothing lasted more than a couple of weekends. There was very little consistency.
Yeah.
But yeah, New York, man, find games all the time. But people are so aggressive up here; it's so easy to get into fights.
Yeah, that's taking it to a meta level it doesn't need to go to.
The last guy we rolled dice with, he wanted to monetize his game, and I think he was like secretly monetizing it, taking pictures of what was happening, and he would talk about what he was doing. I think he was blogging about it after the fact. And I was like, man, this is not fun. What is happening here? He party killed the table, or yeah, it was not. I don't know what's happening with that situation.
Yeah,
unfortunately, he was a good guy. I liked him, but I just like couldn't get a handle whether we were friends or business opportunities.
Yeah, it's a fun world. I mean, I love it, but I've been doing it forever, and it gets harder with your own children. But it's like right as it starts to get impossible, then your kids are old enough to play. So I guess it'll be okay.
That's what I'm looking forward to. Honestly, I have twins right now, a boy and a girl. I'm so looking forward to them being interested. How about your son at 5? Is he old?
Oh yeah.
Or
yeah. Oh yeah. He was playing when he was 3. Like
oh really?
Yeah. I started him off young, and he gets a kick out of it.
Give me advice. My kids are maybe, I feel like they're too old, but then again, they surprise me all the time. They're two and a half now.
Yeah. So, I mean, it starts, it's just, I mean, do you read to them like story time?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the same thing. I mean, it's just interactive story time. That's if they love story time, then get out a couple cool models that aren't too scary and keep it real simple. Like, you can make it up as you go. They'll be captivated, and you'll be amazed how quickly they'll start making just crazy cool narrative decisions that you didn't expect. I mean, here I am putting all these monsters in front of my son, thinking, he's the 3, 4, 5. And this has been several years now, but he's a boy, so I'm thinking he's going to want to kill everything. And the next thing you know, he's like, I want to talk to the king and tell him, and he's like trying to negotiate and do all this stuff and problem solve it out. So, I mean, it's just it's all about the story, and you can literally just use 6-sided dice. Don't bother. I mean, I've seen people online on like Facebook forums get all, how do I introduce them to D&D? I'm like, forget D&D. Who cares?
That's so cool. Just make a story up for your kids. That's so
it.
awesome.
And
my son loves dinosaurs. We have these little plastic dinosaurs. I mean, I'm thinking to myself right now, I'm already in the narrative arc with him with dinosaurs, and my daughter's like right there too.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's so cool.
And they learn, they learn dice and they love numbers. So, they just get into every aspect of it. So you're just using like a simple, pull the dice out of Monopoly or whatever, it doesn't matter. And you just, if it's super easy to do, be like, well, you got to get 3, 4, 5, or 6, and you just make it up and they roll, and then they get super excited when they hit it. And then if it's harder, you just adjust accordingly. It's, but at the end of the day, they're so captivated by what you're saying, and give them free reign to manipulate the story, and because they want to take over all the time. Well, no, let's say it's this. Okay, fine. Let's just let them do it.
Yeah, it's not about challenging. It's not about killing your kids' characters or anything. It's letting them succeed and be happy, right?
Yeah, and just establishing a foundation of collaborative storytelling and imagination, and I mean, it's just about building the love of it, just like anything. I mean,
yeah,
anything as a parent, you're trying to build the love of something that And like you said, that's what you said about the dinosaurs is perfect, because you're not trying to force like necessarily all your thing. It's like, oh, well, what is he like? Okay, boom.
I can't believe they just woke up one day and they love dinosaurs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They love these little alphabet things. All of a sudden, it's like, man, you're turning into people.
Yeah.
How is that possible? Just like 2 years ago, you were laying on your backs, you were nothing without me picking you up and moving you somewhere else.
That's right.
Being a father is the most crazy thing. It just honestly is.
Awesome. It's absolutely awesome. I
can't imagine not being a father, but at the same time, I'm exhausted all the time and stressed.
Well, yeah, but you've probably done this. My wife and I literally will be like remembering something, like reminiscing, and we'll be thinking about something that happened in Chicago, and I'll look at her and be like, well, that was such a fun night, but what did we do with Wyatt? And she like pauses, and then she goes, Wyatt wasn't born yet. And you insert them into your history because you can't remember what it was like before they were around.
Honestly, we never even reminisce about anything prior to the babies, because it's been like it's been such a crazy 3 years, since.
It's hard to say with twins. I have dear friends who've gone through it, and so yeah, it's having only one. I've seen it with it's so much harder.
The world has completely changed. I mean, it's been like oh my God. The entire world is about them right now.
Oh, sure.
Do you get opportunities to game at all now as an adult without babies or without your son?
Yeah. So like he hit an age, he started to get easier. My wife and I have always been very good about having sort of our own protected time as much as possible. And I have a gaming group here, and that's usually where I find my friends. I found all my best friends in Chicago through gaming. I found all my new friends back home in Atlanta through gaming. So we were going strong until all this stuff with my career kind of went crazy. We were playing sometimes twice a week.
Wow.
Which that was a really good stretch. But we would do role playing one night and wargaming one night. So we did two different hobbies. So some people would do one game or both, and some, so it was like some people were more into the wargaming, some people were more into the role playing. And I would host it at my house, and it just became like the haunt, and people would show up, and but I've had to put that on hold a little bit just because I've got these deadlines looming. But everybody knows that, I could send an email out tomorrow just being like, guys, I got some time, who's available? So it's I love it. So I do find time for myself, which is nice.
So in terms of like your interest all growing up, were you one of those kind of guys that only read fantasy and science fiction, or did you find yourself reading a bunch of everything?
No, I was a mostly science fiction fantasy guy. Like I was dyed in the wool. Yeah, I was just a theater nerd and a gaming nerd and a comic book nerd. And um, yeah, I mean, not like you. I wasn't the athlete. I was still ridiculed for what I did, but I didn't have that dichotomy of like also like having to hide it. Like I was hiding from the jocks, but I wasn't a jock in the locker room. So yeah, I mean, but no, I was, I spent part of my childhood in the United Kingdom, so that just solidified it. When you're able to basically walk across the street and go into a medieval church, I mean, it's like, oh, there's a crusader buried in the floor, and it's like
Yeah.
a few blocks from my house, right?
I
I
spent a
mean,
year in Germany. That was a really awesome experience for me. It
yeah,
was really cool to see that as well, to walk into a church and see a Knight Templar or whatnot,
yeah,
a bishop's effigy right there. What's that, Dad? Oh, that's a blah blah blah. Yeah, I
yeah.
thought that was a neat experience. Or walk into the forest and see a watchtower or whatnot. It's just a neat experience to be
It
someplace
is.
away from where you're used to. I felt like I was on foreign country when I came home. How old were you when you went to the UK?
I was 9, so I left. I,
9.
le- I left Tennessee, went to London area, and then stayed there for almost 4 years, and then came back to Atlanta. So it was culture shock twice in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, same as me, honestly. Yeah, it was Florida when I came back, and Sam's dad because divorce and all that horrible stuff.
Right.
So it was like culture shock plus man of the house type situation.
Oh man. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
that's that's true.
I was an aberration. I was the one reading and listening to Mozart on my headphones while the bus is on its way to a football game, trying to
That's a
figure out the meaning of life while all my football friends themselves wedgies. And if I don't know if you know what a meathead is, but I had a buddy trying to give everybody meatheads on the buses. Like, oh my god,
sounds
basically
like
sexually assaulting everybody. That's all I
yeah, it's hard to
realized.
say. It sounds like something I'm blessedly ignorant about.
No, yeah, I mean, playing football was horrible. I broke my arm, blew out both my knees, sprained ankles. I mean, there was like oh man, I really into death fantasies. In terms of like that level of speculative fiction, like a Richard Matheson's "What Dreams May Come," writing about
Sure.
the afterlife, stuff like that. So I'm listening to this guy's near-death experience, and he talks about how playing football, 100% of the football players get hurt. But if you rock climb, rarely you get hurt. And I thought to myself, yeah, I got hurt. Everybody I knew who played football got hurt. It's just a very dangerous, dangerous sport.
Yeah.
But I mean, writing, life, everything, it's just a weird way to go through existence, pain, frustration.
Well, but you can catalog it. I mean, the beauty. I mean, you played football. You've taken some hits. You've hit back. So I mean, that can certainly help. I mean, I had a friend who wrote a funny tweet the other day, another writer, and he said, when you get, he said, you're a writer when you get stung by a yellow jacket, and through the pain, you're busy trying to remember what it felt like so you can describe it later in a book. I mean, so it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, you can pull from all that. I definitely think having physical experiences, whatever they are a good thing. So it'll serve. It'll serve. It's football experience will serve. You'll use it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
especially being
totally.
being an army guy. I mean, you've lived what Teddy Roosevelt called the strenuous life, right? So
The
uh,
strenuous life.
you
At
know,
least I didn't lose an eye. I mean,
oh, yeah, good thing.
not yet anyway. I mean, when did he lose that eye? He was in his 50s, 60s. What a
Uh,
crazy guy.
yeah, oh yeah. I think it was because of some fever and some. It was like when he was on.
Boxing.
Was it boxing? I thought it was like.
Boxing. Yeah, in
Was
the
it?
White House, I think, as far as I'm
Okay.
aware. He was
I couldn't.
boxing.
I couldn't remember if it
Died.
was one of his safaris where he got sick or something.
Can you imagine sparring with the president of the United States and punching him in the face, and all of a sudden he loses an eyeball?
Well, yeah.
Oh, Mr. President, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Times have changed for sure. Yeah.
Oh man, I'd love that. Never mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't gonna take it there. I don't know where your audience leans though. I was
No,
gonna.
I don't know. My audience, I don't. Where do you lean? No, I don't want to go there. The politics in this country right now, man. This is a horrible time to be alive. What do they say? What's the phrase? The curse. Um, living in interesting times.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess we kind of live in interesting times and boring times at the same time. You know what I mean? We just sit here and stare at computer monitors all day long while other people make the rules around us.
It's tough. It's hard not to it's hard not to get very morose, I think, for some of us. And then I see other people who just, they don't let anything get to them, or seemingly don't. I don't know. I try. I can be a pretty negative guy, as my wife will tell you, but I really dislike cynicism. And not that I dislike people who are cynics, but I try not to let it enter my life too much. And when I do, I try to nip it in the bud. And I think I wish that more of us, we had the freedom to travel more, because I really feel like travel is sort of the balm and the remedy to a lot of our hatreds and our biases and our, I just think the more you see the world, the more you realize really nobody's all that different.
You know what I would love to do? I would love to set foot on the pyramids. I would love to actually see the Giza and see that 2,000-year-old or 5,000. How old are they? 4,000 years?
It depends on which one, but yeah, they're up there.
And then there are ancient parts of this world that I will probably never see because I am afraid of the violence that surrounds them because of where I was born. I don't feel like I'm welcome because of the color of my skin or my religious background or whatnot.
It's hard, but my father-in-law, who's from Chicago, white as you can imagine, he does not blend in overseas, especially in the Middle East. And he went over to Egypt just within the last few years with a group to sing. And he basically came back being like, "Look, I went over there fairly trepidatious," and he's like, "I would go back in a heartbeat." He's like, "You just gotta. It's tough, but you just gotta master it and go." And and it's hard not to let the news sort of get you down.
And I say things like that. And I talked to a woman on this podcast a few months ago who said the exact same thing to me that you just said. The news media can freak you out. When my children get old enough to be able to walk to the park by themselves and go play, I should go let them do that, because there are not a million white vans trolling neighborhoods to pick up children.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, it's hard to do that in your head, especially with kids, but even yourself. And I don't know. I've got my sights set on more travel, and because I used to do it.
Travel.
Yeah, I used to do it so much as a younger man and a kid, but I felt like the last 10 years I just haven't done it.
I think more than anything else is the fact that, I did join the Army in peacetime, and I did not go to war. So when the whole horrible situation happened with 9/11 and Afghanistan and Iraq, I saw people like myself, even people I served with. I lost buddies in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I thought to myself, my God, that could be me. And I drove trucks when I was in the Army. So, I mean, it doesn't sound like a dangerous job, but
sure.
They loaded stuff onto my truck and I drove from point A to point B, but it wasn't the loading the stuff on the truck. It wasn't the offloading the stuff on the truck. It was when you rolled over, an IED and went boom.
Right.
I watched tons of videos of people dying all the time. I had a friend, Specialist Nutt, has a horrible name, Nutt, David Nutt. He swerved to avoid hitting a few Iraqi civilians who were crossing a road and landed in a ditch. He died. I was like, my God, man, I knew that guy. Looked in his eyes, shook his hand, made fun of his last name endlessly. Endlessly.
Right.
I mean, it was so much fun to make fun of this dude's last name. And, he died. And it just makes me nervous for something that never happened to me. You know what I mean? So, I mean, you just get nervous about something that never happened to you. So when I go to Egypt in my brain, I think of
worst case scenario.
The worst case scenario. I go to the Philippines in my head. I think of that horrible situation that befell that Canadian tourist. I mean, you see these. I mean, it's one person out of the 7 billion that live on this planet.
Yeah, no, it's tricky. But I have my sight. Told my wife I have my sight set on retiring to like the south of Spain, right?
Really?
And
Barcelona.
And I want to go to I want to go more to like Andalusia or Andalusia, I guess as they say, Seville, Cordoba. But right there, I mean, you can take like a quick jaunt in North Africa and in Tangiers and all that. And it's funny because like south of Spain does not seem uncomfortable to me, but North Africa sort of does. But I'm like, but you know what? That's why I want to do it. Like I want to be living in a place that forces me to test it, right? I want to to get over it. I want to,
Yeah.
I want to, and so it's like I've told myself, yeah, I'm going to retire to the south of Spain, and then my first month there, I'm gonna go to Tangiers. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to see what happens.
No, it's totally true. In the moment, I'm not afraid. Like Puerto Rico, I went swimming in what is that? The Caribbean? I guess that's the Caribbean. All I thought of was bull sharks after the fact. But I went swimming. But I went swimming in that water. But after the fact, I'm like, man, they're having tons of bull sharks in that water.
Yeah. I've only had one panic attack in my life, and I was in high school, and I went to this friend's grandmother's house in the bayou somewhere in rural Louisiana.
Oh.
And we were tubing. So we were on boats out in the, and we were tubing. And I fell off the tube, and like I'm just waiting. I'm just, treading water. I know how to swim. I'm just waiting for the boat to turn around and come back and get me. So they're making the loop. And as I'm sitting there like paddling, just waiting for them to come back, I was, had a smile on my face. And then I had this memory. I was like, last night we were looking in the same water, alligators sniffing with flashlights, and finding them. And I'm like, and now here I am, like with my little feet flapping in the water. And that boat took so long to get back. That was the longest like 49 seconds.
I grew up on the coast of Florida. No, sir. But when I was a kid, I would do the dumbest freaking things. Me and my brother would take the canoe out to the Gulf of Mexico. We'd just paddle out to the Gulf of Mexico. And we were dumb. What we would do is we would tie it. We were dumb. We were 13-year-old kids. We were dumb. We would paddle miles out into the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, we wouldn't just paddle to the coast. We would paddle to like these sandbars that were far, far out there. And we would snorkel, and we would tie ropes to these cement weights. We wouldn't have like a regular anchor, and the ropes weren't even long enough to where the weight would sit on the bottom. It would just like float in the water.
Yeah, right.
And we'd go down there and we'd snorkel, and there are sharks in these waters. There are hammerhead sharks, and there are nurse sharks, and they're all type barracuda and whatever. I mean, all these dangerous animals. And we'd come back up, and the canoe would be like half a mile down. I mean, these are the same waters that you hear of like Tampa Bay Buccaneers like losing their boats in and dying.
Right.
And we're just a bunch of 13-year-old and 11-year-old kids out there snorkeling.
Right.
I think about that all the time. I'm like, I should be dead right now. This is probably me in heaven being digested in a hammerhead shark's stomach. Right. Or something along those lines.
But the thing is, like you say, at the end of the day, we hear the statistics of how many kids your age at that same time we're doing that, right? Far more
than a year, maybe.
Yeah, well, maybe, but I mean, it's like we hear about all the ones who, we're so worried about being the statistic, like the one that dies, but most people don't, and it's just
most people don't.
It's just like seeing footage of Vietnam, not the war, but modern day Vietnam, and people riding their scooters through the streets, and they've got like, a kid that's a toddler with no helmet right in front of them. In America, we can't conceive of that, right? But that's rush hour every day for them, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And it's most of them are fine. It's just, you fixate on the ones the bad accidents, it's just, it's tricky.
Life is, I mean, like I said, there's 7 billion people on this planet, and most of them survive every single day. All of them survive pretty much every single day.
Yeah.
There aren't really that many people that die every single day. The likelihood that you're going to survive is pretty high.
Yeah. So, yeah, but you gotta, I think we all have that balance, or at least in this country, we're trying to balance out, what we need to do versus what we want to do versus what maybe we should be doing. And it's either that, or you and I are just two like white guys waxing poetical about, nothing, while everyone else is like, wow, they really have no problems. I don't know.
We really don't, man. If you think, I think I have no problems, unfortunately. I do sit here and stare at a screen all day long in a nice, comfortable house. And while other people, have immense struggle. But I don't think there's anything wrong with struggling necessarily. It's overcoming the struggle that feels amazing. I mean, it's not the flu. It's getting better that feels good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that, unfortunately, oh man, what did I hear? It was a Beatles quote the other day. It was tape your wing up and fly, or something along those lines. I mean, do you know what I'm talking about?
No,
Blackbird, tape your wing up and fly. It wasn't this thing where the blackbird had a broken wing. It's the fixing of the broken wing and learn to fly again.
yeah,
And it
sure,
was
right.
just kind of interesting. Yes, your wing is broken, but you still have to fly, so figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of us, whether no matter what your background is or what you've gone through, some of us have it harder than others over more extended periods of time. But I think most of the strongest people I've ever met, most of the most impressive people I've ever met, had way harder lives than I've had. So I feel like maybe they would have wished it was better, and maybe don't. And sometimes they realize, and sometimes they don't, that it might have been hard, but you're stronger and better for the struggle.
Yeah, what do
Um,
they say? You're not going to survive life unscathed.
Yeah. Right.
you're,
Yeah.
you're going to get damaged in some way or another. And whether or not you view this presidency as a wonderful thing, or fortunately or unfortunately, 70% of Americans don't think it is. We're going to be better off for it, or whatever. We're going to survive the fire.
Yeah. I mean, right. I mean, in some ways we're seeing, that it can't always be great, and it can
The
get a lot.
conversation is going to be an interesting one. And I
Yeah.
think we are having a fantastic conversation. As a historian and as somebody who really, I love history. I think it's a magnificent subject. We are experiencing it right now on such a profound level, and you can't get much better than that.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
going to
No,
we're gonna be able to talk about this with our children in 20 years. Be like, tell us about the grand experiment with President Trump.
and then I'll say, I lived it. I don't want to revisit it.
No, you can't wait to tell them about the grand experiment with Donald Trump.
Yeah, I'll be that old man who just wants to talk all the time, probably.
Right. Let me tell you what I went through. It was wonderful. We starved. That's at least one thing that we have going for us, is that we will not be starving in the memories that we will retell our children.
Yeah, I guess if we make that claim, yeah, we'll be lying. That's true. It's kind of like the uphill and the snow both ways thing, right?
At least our grandparents, when they told us stories, my grandmother, she had to drop out of middle school at like 12 years old, and she had to cart wet laundry in the dirty Brooklyn streets and cook in the family deli. And like, my God, Grandma, I didn't learn how to read until I was 21. It's like, my God.
Yeah.
My grandmother in Appalachia, I mean, she was barefoot, and if she got her dress wet while washing dishes, she would get her butt kicked by my great grandmother, who lived with her until she was 100.
Yeah, those mountain folks have got some longevity, that's for sure.
Yeah, and she's still alive. She's like 90, and they both had dementia. She has dementia too. They're crazy-ness. Life is just crazy.
Either the mind or the body, one of them is eventually going to go. So,
which would you prefer, the mind or the body?
I don't know, man. Like I guess I'd rather have the body go, only because I won't be this lucky, but my grandfather lived to be 97, and his memory was better than mine. His body just gave out on him. But at least he didn't. I got to see him deal with the physical, and he could handle that okay. But I don't know, mental faculties going, but you're still physically healthy, just seems like a whole other kind of prison.
I wonder if the fact that we use our brains on a daily basis, we exercise them so much, hopefully we will be able to continue to use them far into the future.
I hope, but I don't have a lot. I mean, I don't have a lot of hope for myself. I feel like I already have Alzheimer's half the time. You can't remember anything.
Well, man, I feel like we've had a great conversation. I hate to keep you any longer. I don't even know how long every time I start one of these podcasts, I'm like, okay, start your timer. And my phone is sitting here unused. So I have no clue.
No, it was good. No worries.
Is there anything that you think that we should have mentioned that I neglected to?
No. I guess I would just say that, for the people who haven't heard of me, I appreciate you taking the time to listen. And, if you feel like reading a new, fantasy book new to you, I do have 2 books still available on Amazon. The Exiled Heir and The Errantry of Bantam Flynn, both by Jonathan French. And then The Gray Bastards will be coming out, being re-released by me by Penguin Random House next summer. Should be a pretty big release. So right now I'm just sort of waiting for that to happen. I feel like I'm kind of in working limbo.
That's real exciting, man. I mean, I obviously just met you on this podcast and on Twitter a few weeks ago, but I'm proud of you. That's really exciting. And if you want, come back on and we'll talk about the release. I mean, that's real exciting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, when there starts being actually something more to talk about, that's the thing. I feel kind of like, I'm an imposter at this moment, because it's like, yeah, I kind of did something exciting, but there's really no proof of it. But no, yeah, for sure, when they're pushing me to do the promotion junket, we'll chat again.
Fantastic. Just a couple questions and I'll let you get out of here.
Yeah.
Number one, what are you reading right now that we should know about?
Okay, so right now, I'm not reading anything modern. I'm actually reading a book a biography of it's called the Chevalier Bayard, so the Knight Bayard by Shellabarger. I read mostly biography or historical fiction when I'm writing, so I don't read a lot of interesting fiction because it just gets too incestuous. I end up, I just like to read something different than where I'm writing. So I can't point, but here's what I will say. I'm not reading it currently, but I will tell people, if you're a fantasy fan and you want to get on kind of the cutting edge of what's going on, any book involved in any of the self-publishing fantasy blog off contests, last year's, the year I was in, or this year's,
the Mark Lawrence.
Yeah, especially the top 10. I mean, even any of them. I mean, right now, a lot of those books, not just mine, but a lot of them are getting a lot of good press. People have probably heard of Josiah Bancroft's Sinlin Ascends, which is, he got picked up by a big publisher as well. He's doing very well because of Spiffbo. Phil Tucker is another name to look out for. Dirk Ashton. There's a lot of people doing
Dirk
a lot
Ashton
of stuff.
Was my first podcast ever.
So yeah, so you guys know him. I mean, he's brilliant at way more than I am. He and I are going to be hanging out at DragonCon this coming weekend. And there'll be the first time we've ever met face to face, but I'm going to be picking his brain because even though he has, a third of the books that I have out, his social media marketing and his presence is just impressive.
I owe him a huge debt of gratitude. And honestly, you mentioning him, I wanted him to be my number 50. Honestly, he was so busy he couldn't do it. It's kind of of karmic that you would be your number 5 hero. And
I'll rub that in his face. He because he came in third in the Spiffbo and I came in first. So he likes to tease me that I took something from him.
He's a great guy. I really enjoyed our conversation.
He's fantastic. And Josiah Bancroft too, Phil Tucker, those guys. I mean, I've never met any of them face to face, but it just felt like we had been friends forever. And they're gentlemen among men. I'm probably the most rough around the edges of all of them. They're all just super professional. And but yeah, I mean, basically, I guess I would say, if you're reading and give somebody smaller on the totem pole a chance, because sometimes it can mean the world to them, and you can end up finding a great book. So yeah,
that's really good advice. My last question, I do promise you, is if you had an opportunity to, and you do, to tell somebody who's looking to, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, maybe I thought I lost you there for a second.
No, I'm good.
What's your advice for somebody who's struggling to write, to perform, to put content out there? Something in their soul begging to get out, scratching out the door.
Yeah, well, if they're having trouble, I think the important thing is to remember that writing starts as a hobby always. So the hard part is going from hobby into habit, and habits are tough to form. But if you can make that transition, and however you do it, whether it's setting yourself a word count every day and hitting it no matter what, whether it's, however you choose to divide your time, but, developing a habit is huge. So go from hobby to habit. And once the habit is solidified, then you need to start working on turning that into, a profession, because, that's the hard part. But you do the habit long enough, you can turn it into a profession. Now, this is coming from somebody who's backslid. I've gone from hobby to habit to profession to back again. I've gone all the way back down to hobby and had to work my way back up. So, I think it seems like general advice, but it's kind of accessible. I think that most people can break that down. You
That's
know,
really good advice. Do you think it's because you got so excited with your success? Do you think you deserve it? I mean, you just kind of had a huge kind of wow moment.
yeah, no, I am very fortunate. It's hard to fathom some days. It still doesn't really feel real. I don't think it will feel real until Gray Bastards is actually re-released. Because right now, again, I'm in this weird place where I had a book that was doing well that I had to take off of sale and had to basically remove from the world in order for it to have a better future, more than what I could give it. So it's going to feel real, I think, when the closer to publication we get. But
Yeah.
I still have to be a working writer. I still have to continue to do what I do, even outside the spotlight. So yeah, I mean, I am very fortunate, and my story isn't unique. And I hope it's happened to other people. It will happen to other people. It's still rare, but there's no guarantees. Anyone will tell you. Publishing and writing, it's a crapshoot. So
Yeah.
you've just got to give it some gumption, and you only fail when you quit, which is super cliche. I mean, that's a total platitude, but it's really all there is, right? I mean, there's no age bracket on writing. There's no, it's not like being a professional athlete. There's not going to be a point where someone tells you, oh, you're just too old. It's not going to happen. So, it's just, you'll either keep going or you won't. And if you do, you increase the odds every day that you keep going that you're going to make something happen with it.
It's excellent. And Jonathan, I've really almost called you Neil.
You didn't know. You made it the whole time.
I shouldn't have told on myself. Damn it.
No. Brought it back around. It's like that's a boomerang. That's good.
Oh man, I really, really enjoyed the conversation. It was so much fun talking with you. And
thanks for having me.
I wish you all the luck in the world. And again, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Had a good time.
All right, too. You have a great day.
You too, bud.
All right, bye.